Alright, welcome back to Backwoods Pursuit here on our rifle scope series here on selecting a rifle scope. And if you're looking at what's a good rifle scope for me, what do all the numbers mean? There's so many options for rifle scopes out there. So in this video we wanted to talk about some of the optical features that you can see in some of these scopes. We talked a lot of the physical features and narrowed down how we're going to pick a rifle scope that's best for our specific needs. But on the optical side of things, what's parallax? Is optical quality really that important in a rifle scope? And if you can just see the target, is that good? What's the minutes of angle adjustment, or when you have a scope that says it's got 110 MOA? What does that mean? If you have something that just has 20 or 30, 40, is that going to be enough? And how does that correlate with a base that you put on the rifle as well? And MOA or mil, obviously a lot of things to cover there, but we'll kind of go over it somewhat quickly here and at least help you narrow it down and get started.
For the optics stuff, the optical quality, it kind of is it's a catch-22 with optics as far as it really depends on the quality of the glass, because Zeiss is going to run a better quality of glass than the Nikon. Right. Yeah. So, and you kind of get what you pay for with glass, especially.
Pretty typical.
Yeah. But how it'll basically scopes work is it refracts all the light, and there's a ton. Everybody just thinks there's a lens here and a lens here, but there's a ton of different lenses in here that basically every lens that they put in there is a chance for them to correct something optically within the system. But with every lens that they put in, you're going to lose some light transmission. Even with all the coatings and stuff, you're not going to get 100% light transmission. So
you'll see 92% light transmission on.
Certain optic companies will actually tell you, we're getting so much light transmission through it, which is kind of going towards their optical quality and the glass and the coatings that they use. But so then you're also getting into weight. So the more lenses you put in there, you have a chance to. So lower quality lenses, they're putting more of them in there to correct the optical quality, whether it's the chromatic aberration, the contrast, light transmission, stuff like that, edge-to-edge clarity. But then you're also getting into weight and then losing some of the light transmission. But you definitely get what you pay for with glass, especially. So that's hard. That's one of those budget items things. I always try to buy at the top end of my budget, because you will see a difference between $1,000 scope and a $400 scope.
Well, like we talked about earlier, this old Ruger M77. This is just a little Ruger American. It's not an expensive rifle. Now we've got a nice $1,300 Zeiss scope on there. For me, if I know the gun shoots well, if you're shooting sub 1 MOA on the gun itself, and you got a round loaded for that, or you found a box round or whatever you're shooting, and you know that gun shoots, I'll put an expensive optic on a cheaper gun all day long rather than the other way around, because
and just because it's a Ruger American doesn't mean it can't shoot sub MOA, and it's a system that you got built there, that from the stock to the action to the optic and everything, and so you will get everything out of the rifle with a good optic. Because if that optic doesn't hold zero, if it doesn't return to zero when you're dialing all over the place, really you're going to sit there and think it's your gun. Well, it's not. No, you just threw a $300,
I remember my first scope was a Tasco World Class. $90-something, on this gun here. Actually, this was my first rifle. It was bought when I was 13 years old.
It's got a facelift since then.
A little bit of facelift in it, but about every year to year and a half, that Tasco World Class, those reticles will start spinning. Of course, they had a lifetime warranty, so they had to use that about every year.
They probably had wire reticle in there too, and not an edged reticle.
So,
a lot of these optics nowadays are edged reticles, so you're not going to get that your old duplex reticle that a piece breaks off of it.
But that to say, you can dress up a less expensive gun and get it shooting really well, and then someday, if I want to upgrade this rifle, keep this Zeiss on there. I mean,
put a new barrel on it.
Put a new barrel. You can do.
You can really customize rifles nowadays. I mean, obviously, I built one,
you built one now right here.
But it's you're never gonna go. I should have bought a cheaper scope.
Yeah.
You know,
You'll never
so
say that.
You're never going to, but you know,
your bank account might.
your wife might.
Yeah.
But you're never gonna regret buying a good piece of glass.
Yeah.
But you are gonna, you know, if you're gonna go out there and you're gonna be like, hey man, I want to shoot PRS or I want to dial, I want to do all this stuff. If you buy a cheaper scope, it's not gonna. If it says it's going up a minute, it's not gonna go up a minute. It's gonna go up something else, or it's not gonna be consistent.
Right.
If it doesn't go up an exact minute, we'll talk about that in a little bit. That's fine. You can correct for that. But if it's not consistent, that's where you're gonna have the problems. Yeah. And with the less expensive scopes, their Rector systems and all their adjustments, they're generally cheaper, and so you're not going to get that repeatability and that consistency out of it that you'll get out of something a little bit higher.
Yeah.
Right.
So on the reticles, there are a ton of reticles out there.
Yep.
And again, it's personal preference. We talked about illuminated or not in the last video. You can check that out if you're interested in some of those features. But the reticle itself, something like this Nikon, which is just a plain old BDC reticle, as this came in the old duplex when I bought it years ago. It's capped, so you just set it, forget it, but you have a BDC reticle in there. So you do have that ability to make an adjustment without adjusting the scope. Granted, it's not incredibly accurate. You have to do some practice to find out what that is versus dialing it in here and then picking with a dial like that. But then you've got a bunch of reticles that all these offer. Most scope manufacturers seem like they offer a number of reticles in the exact same scope. So how do you pick one? Obviously, it's going to be, is it hunting or is it PRS or is it, some kind of shooting like that, depending on what kind of shooting you're doing.
Right.
But let's say for a hunting rifle, because that's mostly what we're talking about here, how do you pick a reticle that's going to best suit your needs?
Man, I like something with some type of a windage hold at least. Like you said, it really depends on what you're going to do with that scope. If you're a set it, forget it with a 200-yard zero and you're not going to shoot past 400, you're not going to hold for wind. Right. So you're not set up for that. You don't want to do that. That's fine. And everybody needs to know their own limitations of their optical system, their shooting abilities, and their cartridge. But if you're going to want to do that further shooting, at some point you are going to have to account for the wind. And with a reticle, the Winplex reticle here, I know a lot of them will have some type of horizontal hash marks that are going out, whether it's minute hash marks, whether it's 2 minutes, whatever it is. You need to know what those hash marks are, but I like having something so I can hold wind. And really that kind of goes back to your zoom range, because all those are calibrated for a certain magnification, generally the high magnification. So
well, that kind of transitions perfectly into first or second focal plane.
I guess we could lump that all into the same, because different reticles, you're not going to be able to get in a second focal plane. A lot of the Christmas tree type, you look at the Horus, reticles and different ones that have basically just looks like a grid from the center going down, and those are really nice because you can hold precisely going through there, but it can get really busy.
It's busy though, so
and generally those are first focal plane reticles, which means basically as you're zooming in and out of the your power range, that reticle is growing and shrinking as you go. So if you're zooming in,
your subtensions are holding.
So they're the same. So if it's a minute at 4 power, it's going to be a minute at 16 power. So it's growing along with your image and everything. Everything's staying relative to each other. On a second,
but you're losing that adjustment at the bottom end because you're zoomed all the way in, so you don't see the entire reticle.
Exactly. So if there's 80 minutes of hash marks, by the time you get all the way zoomed in, you might be at 30. But that's
if you're shooting that far, you probably should take time to dial.
That's a lot. But you're also, for a hunting scope, first focal plane, if you're not used to it, at low power, it's really small. It's really hard to see. It's very fine. If you don't have an illuminated reticle, it can be really hard to figure out where your center crosshairs are in low light situations, which is why having that illuminated reticle is really nice. But a lot of people have a hard time getting past that, how small that reticle is at low power, and then how big it is at full power. A lot of times that reticle, it's real fat at the higher powers. So
and really, when you're zoomed all the way in and it is the biggest, that's when you're shooting long range if you're going to. And so you want that to be more fine, so that it's kind of
a lot of people complain about it when they're zeroing at 100 yards. They'll crank the sucker up to 29, and they're going, man, that reticle's covering the whole dot.
It's like,
back it off to 20. You know, you don't need, or, you know, 15. Shoot, that's, you know, then that reticle gets a little bit smaller. You can be a little bit finer. But with a second focal plane scope, those subtensions are calibrated for a certain magnification.
Right.
Full power generally.
You have to know that.
Yeah.
If you're going to shoot
different scopes. I don't think we have any of them up here. Some of them will have basically a dot or some type of a mark on the power ring.
Okay.
That is, so it's half or double your whatever your holds are. So if you got a Winplex reticle that's got 1 MOA hash marks, if you zip that down to, I don't know, 8, whatever, wherever that would be calibrated to, then those are 2 MOA hash marks going out instead of 1. So some scopes have that on there. I know my my old Vortex PST has that, and it's actually got almost like a detent to where that power ring will kind of click, and you can feel it tactilely that you're right there in that middle mark, which is kind of nice because then you can just take and double your whatever your values are. But most of them are calibrated for a certain magnification. Usually it's full power, which is nice. But if you're, you know, say you're shooting at 300 yards, but you're trying to use your BDC reticle and you're zipped all the way in, you know, I don't like using that much magnification when I'm real close, so it's tough. But most of the time you're not going to be using that BDC type of reticle. But along with the BDC reticle, I like to true that reticle up, and a lot of times they're just general kind of a MOA or drop values down that scope for a general hunting cartridge, whether it's 30-06 or whatever. But it's basically based on your ballistic coefficient and your speed and everything like that. So it's going to be, you know, they'll say 200, 300, 400, or 300, 400, 500. But you got to, it's not going to be exact. So having a nice, like, an app system on your phone, like iStrellock, something like that, that's got a ton of different reticle systems in it. And you can go, and I played with that a lot because I got a BDC reticle in that. And so I, you know, got all my muzzle velocity, all my BC for my bullets. And I'm going through, and I can look and see, okay, so it's, you know, 288, 386, 450. Okay, well, I want it to be just mentally, and I could go with that, and as long as I know those, I know what those drops are. But mentally, I like having clean numbers, you know, 300, 400, 500, or whatever. So I messed with my zero distance, and that'll change where those drops are on that BDC reticle. So I messed with that until I was at 300, 400, 500, which was nice. It's just easier for my brain to look at and go 3, 4, 5. And so it ended up working out really well. But you can do that with any BDC system, but it's nice to have that app to do that legwork for you, and then always go out and confirm those. So I would set up a target at, you know, that distance that I know, shoot, I'll go, okay, it's verified. Always trust but verify.
Let's see, Bushnell has a nice app that allows you to, you know, put in. A lot of them do. A lot of the companies will do this, where you put in the scope that you're using. There's one of their scopes. Select your reticle, and it'll give you. You can print out your dope chart and stick it on your stock. You can look at your reticle and whatever zoom you're at. If it's a second or first focal plane, you know, obviously it's going to depend on that. But you can go ahead and just see what all those subtensions are right on the app. Of course, if you have time. The same with the Zeiss here. They have a real nice app where you can put in your scope and then what round you're using, you know, and then go out there, and because the Zeiss here is a second focal plane, so if you're at, you know, 12, that's going to be different than if you're all the way up at 24. So you can put in your magnification right there, and it'll tell you, spit out your subtensions for you, which is kind of nice to have as well. So.
That iStrellock Pro app does that too, where you can take and slide and go from, you know, say 16 power, go down and see what those subtensions will change to. Because I know when I go to 10 power, which is kind of my middle range right there, I go from just a little bit over 300 to 500 to 650 on my reticle. So if I needed to, I don't know why I would, but it's just nice to know. I like taking that kind of stuff.
And when I say subtension, I guess we didn't define that, so if you're not familiar with that, that's just the different hash marks on whatever reticle you're using for elevation. Really, I don't think I've found. I don't think I've found a scope system or a scope manufacturer that won't publish
what those hash marks are in either MOA or what they should be with different things.
Yeah.
That all that information's out there if you go looking for it, which is really nice to know.
So speaking of that, MOA, we've been talking mostly MOA. We've got a couple mill scopes here. The Sig Tango 4, that's a mill. That's a 6 to 24, much like the Zeiss here, but it is in a mill. And so is the Bushnell Elite Tactical XRS2. And the way you can see here on these is on your adjustments here, you've got 10 mils here per, well, not 10, a tenth of an adjustment per mil versus 4 adjustments or 4 clicks per MOA. That's the age-old debate on which is better, if there is one that's better, and there really probably isn't necessarily an answer. It's what you're most comfortable with. You know, it seems like military folks that are used to the metric system lean towards mil more so.
Yeah.
Imperial system folks that are more used to that tend to lean towards MOA, but that's just a generalization. So.
And at least nowadays, scopes are going. If you got a MOA turret, you got an MOA reticle.
Yeah.
The old mil dot, reticles, it was a mil reticle, but an MOA turret. So having to do all the conversions and stuff was tough. But I find a lot of guys, like you said, guys that work in yards, feet, things like that, it's definitely easier to go with MOA because it's all pretty much, an MOA is basically an inch at 100 yards, at 10 inches at 1,000 yards. It's an angle of measurement, so it's going to get bigger as you go up. So 1 minute at 400 yards is 4 inches. It's an angular measurement, same with mils, but a lot of guys that hunt, that shoot PRS competition stuff, they usually go in IMRAD mils. You'll hear it, mil radian, IMRAD, or mils. And so it's, I would say, whatever you're comfortable with, because it's, some guys are like, oh, I like going and counting 3.5 instead of counting 17.8. You know, like it's.
Well, I mean,
it's a
getting into it. So when I first started learning more about this, getting into it, I got one of each. Got the Bushnell Forge MOA and the one in the mill. And
I have it
used
both
them both,
too.
and on the one hand, like you said, the OCD part of me liked being able to look at my chart and say, 3.3 mils is 3.3 exact. On the MOA style, you're 3.8. It's like, well, do I round up or down? So.
I always like to round up and give it a chance to get there, right? So I hate missing low.
Right, But so anyway,
because you miss over the back of something, though, sometimes they're like, what happened there? But you hit at their feet and dust flies up and they take off. So I always like missing high.
Right.
But and a lot of people think that a mill, because you're going intense, it seems like it's a smaller, more fine, but it's actually more. It's actually it's a bigger. It's still an angular measurement, but a tenth of a mil is different. It's going to be
0.33.
It's about a third. It's 0.29, but it's about a third of an inch instead of a quarter of an inch.
Quarter of an inch, so
So it is a little bit bigger of an angular measurement. So it's not as fine. So if somebody's trying to get fine, and you can actually find some scopes. It's been a while since I've actually looked, but there'll be an 1/8 minute adjustment instead of
out there too.
a quarter minute, which. I don't know if I would ever
you
need
better
to
than I
get
do
that.
to know that.
I would never need to get something that fine as an adjustment, but it's all, if you're hunting with somebody, use what they use because you're talking the same language. If you're sitting there and you're trying to have a buddy's spot for you and he's going to give you some, wind call, hold 1.3 mils, but you're like, crap, I got a MOA. Oh man, I got to try to convert all this stuff. So it's easier to talk to each other, especially if you're hunting with each other. To go, oh man, hold, give me a 2 minute wind hold. And it's easier because you know what that is.
For sure.
So really, they both work as long as you. I like to stick with one system. Like I said, I got both. Like you got both, and it is a little bit harder to go back and forth. But as long as you know what those values are, it's really it's all the same. It's just an angular measurement. Just one translates a little bit cleaner to meters versus yards, but it's all basically the same.
So, last thing we want to talk about here is parallax. Some scopes, like I know there's some out there that have the parallax adjustment out on the end of the barrel, or the bell, I'm sorry. Most of them, though, have it right here on the side, like this Zeiss everything we have here has the side,
except
side
for
adjustment.
the Nikon, I think,
which doesn't have one at all.
Any at all. Yeah.
So it's not a super easy thing to explain, but
right. Yeah.
Go for
it. If your scope doesn't have a parallax adjustment, some type of a focus knob on either the objective bell or on the side, you really need to know where that parallax is set to. Like your Nikon, generally these old 3 to 9s that don't have any type of a parallax adjustment on it, they're set to about 100 yards generally. But the scope manufacturers will tell you where that parallax is fixed at. Basically,
what
you get into that.
What does it look like if your parallax is off? I guess we'll start there. What does it look like through the scope when you're not set correctly? Yeah,
if your parallax is not set properly, as you move your head around, if you're not consistent behind that rifle, say if you don't have a good cheek well because your scope's sitting high or whatever, as you move your head a little bit, it'll appear that reticle is moving around in relation to your target. That gun could be frozen still, but as you move your head, it seems like that reticle is moving around your target because at that point you've already focused your eyepiece here, so your reticle's in focus with your eye and everything, but then your parallax is off, so your target's not in focus. So I like to think of it as if you had 2 different focal points here, say you moved your fingers, but then you were moving your head around. If you do that, it looks like your finger's moving around in a circle, but it's not. It's staying still. But your perception of it is that it's moving all over the place.
So you really don't know what that impact point's going to be.
Yeah, because you can, and that's when you're shooting groups and you're sitting behind your rifle. If you shoot and then you move your head and you try to go back on, if you're not in the exact same spot on your cheek weld, it could appear that you're off. And so instead of going, oh, it's on still, you're going to move your rifle up a little bit to correct for that, but it appears that it's off, but it's not really. So when you adjust your parallax focus on the side or on the objective, you kind of sit behind the rifle and you can move your head up just ever so slightly, and you'll see that reticle bouncing a little bit, and then as you turn that, it'll stop. It'll stop moving, so you can move your head and it won't appear that reticle's moving. So basically what you're doing is you're bringing both of those focal planes, your reticle and the target, into the same point. So basically it'd be like if you were doing this and you can move your head around and it doesn't look like anything's moving. So that way you have a little bit more play with your cheek and everything if you're in a different shooting position, and you're not going to throw off your shot because everything's in focus and everything's in line with each other focally.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, it can get confusing, but as long as you sit behind that rifle and you can, and you don't have to do a whole lot, you just move your head a little bit and you'll see that reticle move, and then as you adjust that, they all have yardage marks on the side of them, and they're close, they're not exact, so don't ever take that for, oh, it's 350, move it to 350.
It's a good starting point.
It's a good starting point, and then you get there and you kind of, it's that whole, you go to the eye doctor, better 1, better 2, better, so you just kind of play with it until that movement stops.
Perfect. It's a good short explanation. You can get really in the weeds on it and what makes that inside scope. We don't need to get into that necessarily. So that's kind of a rundown of the optical features that you're going to find in most of these scopes. So next part here, we're going to go through these scopes kind of briefly, the ones we've been demonstrating with here, and give you some, just a quick rundown, pros and cons, why you might pick up each one of these scopes or any of them or none of them, and then we can go. You can pick one up if you want, or keep looking if you want, but we'll give you a quick rundown of these scopes. So thanks for joining us here for this video as well. Thanks, Roger, again for some more great information, and join us next video here on these specific scopes, and we'll go through these.